1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff. It is kind of a rainy, dreary day here in Baltimore, which is unfortunately kind of matching the vibe here in this general area of the ballpark. We're going to get into the vibe check, but first and foremost, thank you for asking about my Volo softball team. We did finish our undefeated season with a championship. Capped it off with a walk-off win. It was a season that started in June and was only supposed to be 7 weeks and was rained out about 37 times. We just played our championship on Monday, and we won, so thank you. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. I know you were really worried about it.
Well, first of all, I didn't care because Brendan missed our Volo soccer league, which is way more important.
Whoa. Accusations are being thrown out. Yes, I did miss the Volo Soccer League because I had a championship to play.
And there's a member from Orioles Marketing that was supposed to join our Volo Soccer League, and he has failed.
He shall not be named. He shall not be named. But he was on my Volo championship team.
Oh, yeah. His hurt hip is taking him far.
Listen, it got us a chip. That's all I know.
But for Volo Soccer, we won 3-0, and I think that's because Brendan wasn't there because
that
his
is almost definitely true.
Are certainly going to bring down
I didn't get my own bobblehead. So
yeah, look at that. This is why. Look at who's leading the pack.
Yeah.
An Annie Klaff with the soccer ball, not a Brendan Mortensen with the softball.
That's very true. That's very true. I've never claimed to have my own bobblehead with a soccer ball, and I never will.
Aren't as cool.
I know.
As me.
I know. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
We're gonna stop talking about softball and soccer because we do have a lot of Orioles baseball to talk about as we are in getting into late September. The vibes aren't where the Orioles wish they would be, so we are going to get into that. But first, let's start with some reasons that the vibes could get better, and that is some injury updates that we heard from Mike Elias yesterday. First one being the guy who has had a lot of mystery surrounding the injury, it seems like. That's Ryan Mountcastle, because when this injury first happened, we didn't really think this would be a long-term thing. Like, the wrist was just sore. It was sprained. We didn't know exactly what it looked like. But now, all of a sudden, Ryan Mountcastle has been out for a while, seemingly with not too many updates. But yesterday, Mike Elias told us that Mountie is, quote, doing well. He's in Florida right now making a hitting progression. And Elias said there is a really good chance of seeing him play for Norfolk pretty soon. And that's an emphasis on the pretty soon, because Norfolk's season ends on Sunday. So if there's a pretty good chance that Ryan Mountcastle plays in Norfolk, then that means that he would start a rehab assignment as we sit here on Wednesday sometime over the next 3 or 4 days, which is really encouraging because if he starts a rehab assignment, he can get 2 games in Norfolk under his belt, would probably need some, more simulated hitting practice, some BP up at Camden Yards before he gets up to full game speed, but getting Mountie playing baseball before the week is over would be a really encouraging step.
Yeah, and this is definitely the most positive news about Mountie since the injury happened, and it was kind of, like you said, a weird one of those that you don't expect. I mean, you didn't really expect any of these injuries to occur with the Orioles since the beginning of the season and even before that, but it was one of those kind of freak accident, like he slid into base and then his wrist got jammed.
Yeah.
So then there was that soreness. And then obviously a sprained wrist. So it was one of those you did expect to be back sooner, but this is the most positive news since that happened. And you are hopeful to get him back before the season's over. And this news is kind of coming at a good time too. As we know, the Orioles offense has been slumping. And so this, along with some other guys that we'll talk about, position players, are definitely some positive news on the injured list front. Ones that we have not really gotten much out of the last month, and definitely something if you're an Orioles fan, you're still holding on to as the season wears down with everything that's going on.
Yeah, we'll stick with the position players. Exciting to potentially have Mountie back soon. Mike Elias said that Jordan Westberg is, quote, doing great. Still expecting to see him before the end of the regular season. A possibility that he'll play in Norfolk, so not as strongly worded language as Ryan Mountcastle having a really good chance to play at Norfolk. Westberg was a maybe he plays in Norfolk. But that's still a really encouraging sign because I think we have talked about before more than anybody, Jordan Westburg might be the most important guy to get back in this lineup. This was an all-star third baseman. He is your best clutch hitter with runners in scoring position. Like, Jordan Westburg has been the guy. Ryan Mountcastle is a powerful right-handed bat. Jordan Westburg had a more consistent first half of the season. And if the Orioles need anything right now, it is consistency. And it's the type of leadership that Jordan Westburg brings on the field as well as some good defense at third base. So Elias saying that he is getting really close to playing baseball. Saw Westburg taking BP like a normal hitter would yesterday.
Normal citizen.
Normal citizen, as Elias said. So he's getting there. Yeah. Jordan Westburg is close to being back. I don't know how much he is going to play in the regular season, but this is at least an encouraging sign. If it's possible that he plays in Norfolk, then I would anticipate that we see him before the season wraps up.
Yeah, getting Westburg back would be huge. And I'm going to kind of sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but with each of these guys that we're going to talk about, it gets even better that you is someone that the Orioles need at this point in time to come back, because you've gone through the minor league depth, you've gone through the really young guys in Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, who are also part of that slump right now. So you're really, really looking forward to having these three veterans coming back soon. And especially ones like Westburg and Mountie. Westburg, of course, being the one that you need when you have runners in scoring position, because he is one of the most successful guys that you have at the plate there for the Orioles. Adley Rutschman is up there as well, even though it might not seem like it right now. But Jordan Westburg is definitely the guy that you want him back, of course, but he's also going to be the one to take it responsibly in the Orioles as well, to not kind of force it if time isn't working on his side, because Westburg has indicated many times before that he's going to kind of not be looking at the calendar because he wants to feel healthy for himself beforehand, as he should. And not risk anything further down the line. Yeah,
Ramon Arias falling into that position player category as well. Elias saying that he's getting close to playing real baseball again soon, whether that means a rehab assignment in Norfolk or just ramping baseball activities up remains to be seen. But all three of those guys, encouraging updates there. But that is a recurring theme, especially with the younger guys that are really important. Jordan Westburg, Grayson Rodriguez. That is what Elias was talking about yesterday. With Grayson Rodriguez specifically, he said that Grayson is doing really well, but noted that he's still 5.5 weeks out from when this injury first occurred, and it's usually a 6 to 8 week injury. So if there's one player that the updates didn't sound as encouraging on, it is Grayson Rodriguez, because Elias didn't want to put a timetable on things. Noted that time and the calendar were really not the Orioles' friends with this injury, and as much as you want to get Grayson Rodriguez back, I've seen the possibility tossed around of, maybe he comes back and he's a closer type of role coming out of the bullpen. I'm not going to rule it out. Elias didn't rule it out. Like, the question was asked, could Grayson Rodriguez be a reliever? And Elias basically said, this guy's a starting pitcher. We want him to be a starting pitcher for his career here. And the long-term priority with Grayson Rodriguez and the short-term priority is his long-term health. That is what they are going to be focusing on. So as much as they want Grayson Rodriguez back, before the end of the regular season and pitching in the starting rotation in the playoffs, the priority is that Grayson Rodriguez is a healthy starting pitcher for this team for a while. So if that means that Grayson isn't a starter at the end of the regular season, so be it. Like, if he doesn't get ramped up for the playoffs, that's just kind of the nature of where we're at. It's going to be difficult to get Grayson Rodriguez back to a place where he can be pitching in a starting role in the playoffs. And I think that's just the reality of it right now. Norfolk, as I mentioned, ends their season on Sunday. It sounds pretty unlikely that Grayson Rodriguez is going to make any sort of rehab assignment in the next 3 or 4 days. So that leaves him in a spot where, okay, he could be back and healthy by the end of the regular season, but you don't really have a good way to ramp him up because there's not a rehab assignment he can make. You could use him as a spot starter at the end of the regular season and give him, 3-4 innings to try to ramp him up. But at that point, you're just like giving yourself a bullpen game and putting yourself in a bad spot for the games after that. Like, there's a bunch of different factors here that make it difficult for Grayson Rodriguez to be able to ramp up to where the Orioles would need him to be a starter in the playoffs.
Yeah, and Elias had said that it takes less buildup for Grayson to come back as a bullpen or as a relief arm, which of course, yes, that would be the case.
Right.
But like you said, Elias kind of alluded that Grayson is meant to be a starter. That's kind of where that their focus is going to be. And it is difficult. It would have to be, as Elias said, quote, a simulated experience to get Grayson back to facing live hitters and experience coming back from the injured list before reaching a playoff starting position role, because that would be extremely hard going from 5.5 weeks out and then all of a sudden you're getting thrown into the number 3, number 2 spot in a playoff game.
Yeah.
Which you also kind of don't see that much faith and trust in. It would be amazing to have Rodriguez back, but how much faith are you going to put in him to just come back without a rehab start in Norfolk, facing some of the top hitters in the league at that point in time, with just a simulated welcome back experience kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we with the bullpen, it was kind of interesting because when the Rodriguez injury first happened, we were talking about, okay, then you bring Suarez into the mix, and then, when you get Rodriguez back, because we thought it was going to be kind of a shortened IL stint, then you send Albert Suarez back down to the bullpen, make room for Rodriguez, but it might not look like that now. Obviously, I think despite a rough start for Suarez last night, I think he's probably could be in there for that number 4 spot, even if they go with 4 starting pitchers.
Yeah.
But even looking down the stretch, I think your top 3 in Kramer, Burns, and Eflin, not in that order, but seem pretty solid now, regardless of if you get Rodriguez back or not, because that could be kind of forcing it a little bit for Rodriguez.
Yeah, look, I mean, the pitching has been solid as of late. I think if you're looking at the struggles of this team over the last few weeks, you wouldn't really point to the pitching.
Yeah.
The starting rotation has held up really admirably, and obviously Grayson Rodriguez makes that better. You would like to have a healthy Grayson Rodriguez for the playoffs, but as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season and the beginning of October, getting him back in the rotation and getting back to a place of confidence that he could go out and give you 6 or 7 innings, that's just going to be hard to build him up to that point. Certainly not ruling out the possibility.
Sure.
Elias did not rule out the possibility either. They are still hopeful that he will be back this season and he will be back in the playoffs. But the priority for Grayson Rodriguez is his long-term health, because he's going to be an important starting pitcher on this team for a really long time. They'll still get some pitching reinforcements. Danny Coulombe was supposed to make a rehab assignment in Norfolk last night. That game got rained out, so he is going to pitch tonight. Mike Elias said that Danny Coulombe, it's really going to be up to him in terms of how he is feeling and when they activate him to the big league roster. Coulombe is going to be a massive, massive addition to this bullpen. He is probably among your bullpen arms. He's at least in the top 3 in terms of guys that you would trust in a late game 1 or 2 run situation. Danny Coulombe, I would put firmly in that category. Getting Jacob Webb back the other day is big as well. So we'll see how Danny Coulombe looks tonight. You're not really going to be looking at the numbers. You're going to be looking at how he feels. Where's the velocity at? Does he feel like he has his stuff? And Mike Elias pretty much said, like when Danny feels like he's good to go, health-wise, he's going to get activated and he's going to be here.
Yeah, and that's kind of another sign where it's like time is not on the Orioles' side, because, of course, probably one of his last rehab games that gets postponed, so then there's more time added on. But Elias did say he's going to pitch at least one more time and a few, possibly multiple times with Norfolk. But like you said, you're not looking at the numbers. We've seen a number of times where pitchers go down for a rehab assignment and they don't look so great in the minor leagues, but that doesn't really mean anything because they come back to the big leagues, and it kind of the adrenaline and everything being back at the top level comes into place, and the numbers aren't necessarily going to be the most accurate for how he will play when they come back.
Yeah, he's not looking to, yes, you're trying to win games whenever you're out pitching, but that's not really the point of a rehab assignment. Danny Coulombe is pitching and just hoping that he feels good and the velocity is where it wants it to be, and he's getting the movement and like everything with his elbow feels solid. If Danny Coulombe gives up 5 runs in an outing and he feels good and he could locate and he's got the velo and stuff like that, the 5 runs do not matter.
Yeah.
That is not the priority at all for Danny Coulombe. So I would imagine we will probably see him next week because he's on rehab in Norfolk. Awesome. Norfolk season ends on Sunday. My logic tells me that Danny Coulomb will be activated next week. So if not earlier. So that is going to be a huge addition for this bullpen. And the team needs a spark because the two topics of conversation for Mike Elias yesterday are our two topics today, which are, hey, here's some positive injury updates. And, oh boy, really hope those injured guys are back soon because this team could use it. And Mike Elias yesterday acknowledged the slump. He did not shy away from things. It has not been a fun stretch for the Orioles. This is a team that had really high expectations. They won over 100 games last year. They were one of the best teams in baseball in the first half of the season. And Elias said yesterday, it's been trying. This is the first time this group has experienced this kind of collective struggle since this has been a winning team. He acknowledged, the track record of success that this team has had pretty much with this group since the middle of 2022 when this team really started to turn things around. It's not a completely different team than the guys that won at the beginning of this season, than the guys who were performing at the end of 2022 into 2023. It's obviously a very injured group, and we're going to get to that in terms of part of the reasons why this is happening. But it's not like Mike Elias and company are turning a blind eye to the fact that this is a slump right now. Like, Brandon Hyde is going to get up at his post-game press conference, and he's going to say that the guys are pushing and they're, putting together quality they're trying to put together quality at bats. They're putting in the work because that's what's happening. Like, the entire organization, as Elias said, understands that this is not the kind of baseball they want to be playing. He said, quote, all of us are experiencing this negativity. It's not something that they are just going, we're fine.
Yeah. Like,
everybody is feeling it right now.
Yeah, I mean, he even said that we're all aware as an organization and a team that this is a slump.
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting and difficult to understand because the Orioles probably since late May, all of May, when they were playing super well, and then early June, haven't been a whole unit successful unit together because it went through pitching injuries. So they were pitching slumps, and then the hitters had to press. So like you had Gunnar and Santander and all these veteran hitters who were trying to press and make sure to kind of keep the team afloat and stay at the top spot in the division and in the league as a whole too. And then you kind of go into another phase where the pitching is doing really well right now, but the hitters are not so much. So It's kind of been hard for the Orioles this season to balance all the injuries, so, for one, and then kind of staying on the same wavelength at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the theme for the Orioles this season. But moving forward, all you can really kind of do is look forward to getting Westberg, Arias, Mountie back for that reinforcement. You got Heston Kjerstad back, who didn't necessarily have a great start back on his first game against the Tigers. He went 0 for 2, but then came in as a pinch hitter, hit 2 for 2 last night. So that's still some positives to take from the Orioles' offensive slump, is that, yes, they have tons of guys who are pressing and trying to pick up the slack for this offensive slump, that the Orioles are losing their identity, and that's something that Elias said for a huge part of his presser too.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? Those are the two kind of big things that Elias pointed to, which we have talked about before, which is, A, with all of these injuries, you have a lot of young guys that are just trying to play hero ball right now. Yeah. Everybody is pressing. Everybody is trying to, hit a 7-run homer when they're up to bat. And this lineup just, it doesn't have the same cohesion that it had at the beginning of the season throughout last year, where, there's the faith that, like, they don't need to be the guy to hit the home run every time up. Like, they don't need to pick it up for everybody else. This is a good enough team that they can just kind of do their thing, and they're going to win baseball games that way, right? Mike Elias saying that, sometimes if you try too hard in baseball, like, that hurts you. And that's what a lot of guys are doing right now. We have heard it from Brandon Hyde a lot, just that guys are pressing. And you can, as an organization, whether it's the coaching staff or the players themselves, you can preach as much as you want, like, hey, don't press. Just go up, have your normal at-bats. We're going to string runs together. We're a talented enough group to do that. But it's just kind of human nature to see the amount of guys that are on the injured list, to know that this isn't the same lineup that was producing at the beginning of the season. I mean, you're down your starting first baseman, second baseman, and third baseman from the beginning of the season in Ryan Mountcastle, Jorge Mateo, and Jordan Westberg. You're down a really important depth piece in the lineup in Ramon Arias. Yes, you can preach don't press and don't try to go up and do too much. That's really hard to do just as a human being. Going up to the plate, knowing that like you guys are in the middle of a slump and you're trying to turn things around and you're trying to be the one to hit the home run, to get the mojo back, to get a spark, to get things going. Of course, everybody wants to be that guy. And it's really hard to go up and hit and get that out of your mind. As much as the coaches and the players want to preach it, like that's hard to get away from.
Yeah, I think now more than ever is kind of a reminder that baseball is an extremely mental sport.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's easy to forget, especially for these guys who are still so young. Like Gunnar is most definitely leading the offensive charge right now. He's hitting 275 over the last 10 games. But still, this is a young guy who's leading the offensive pack for the Orioles. And like you said, this is a team who has not been altogether a losing team in these last 10 games.
Before.
And even since the second half, really. It's playing below 500, around 500 ball. And that's really hard for leaders on this team, especially when Jordan Westberg would be one of those leaders. And he's even still super young as well. And on the injured list. So it's hard to kind of get that cohesion, like you said, and kind of play through it, because a lot of these guys are trying to make up for what the team is lacking when they can't do it on their own.
Yeah, that's almost a funny, unintended consequence of winning so much in the minor leagues. Like, these guys have not really lost like this at a group. Coming up throughout the minor leagues, like the Norfolk Tides were touted as one of the best teams in minor league baseball history when it was, Adley and Gunnar and Ortiz and Westberg. And like, you could go down the line and they were just stacked and they were winning games. I mean, Norfolk won the championship, right? Like, that was one of the best minor league teams ever assembled by some pundits. This is really new to a lot of these guys. Like, Adley Rutschman was winning the College World Series when he was in college. He comes up, they have a streak of a year and a half without getting swept. This is a different kind of scenario for these guys that they're just not really used to. They won so much in the minor leagues. They came up and the team pretty instantly turned around. They have never had a stretch like this. Like Gunnar Henderson said last night, he was just like, this is weird. Like, that's the best way you can describe it right now, because yes, you can point to injuries. Yes, you can point to guys playing in roles that they weren't really meant to play in, but it's also just weird. Like, there are good players. This is a well-constructed team by all accounts. They did it in the first half of the season. Michael Elias said yesterday, like, this is the same group. And he has the faith and the confidence that they're going to figure it out down the stretch, that they're going to turn things around. And yes, I know this has been a struggle for a while here, but this is still the same group. Like, that's part of the reason that it is frustrating for everyone in the organization. You saw the frustration from Elias yesterday. This is the same group of players. Yes, injuries have played a large part, but they know that these guys can win. They saw it last year. It's largely the same group of position players. We saw it at the first half of the season. I mean, they made upgrades this season. I mean, last year, with a team that won 100-plus games, you had, Adam Frazier, Jorge Mateo, Austin Hayes, Aaron Hicks. Those guys aren't here anymore. But you bring in, a full year of Jordan Westberg, if he was healthy, a full year of Colton Cowser, other guys at the deadline you brought in, and in the pitching rotation, you don't have Kyle Gibson from last year. You replace him with Corbin Burns and Zach Eflin. This is a group that should be winning a lot of baseball games, and they're just not doing it right now.
Yeah, and it's frustrating and kind of hard to look at it as well, because it is an identity crisis in more than just the facet of not hitting well, because you have the the struggles in pitching and with injuries, that's an identity crisis. You've had to combat that. And Elias even admitted that when it came to the trade deadline, his sole focus was getting reinforcements for pitching. And that was a clear target that everyone knew the Orioles needed at the trade deadline. It wasn't just Elias. That was what everyone thought that the Orioles needed. People even thought that they needed to draft a pitcher when that hasn't been the working formula for the Orioles at the draft as well. So the trade deadline was the Orioles' chance to get reinforcements for the rotation and even the bullpen, and that's what they did. And look at them now. Eflin has slotted himself into the number 2 spot, and that was huge. The Orioles really needed that. But of course, you're not going to predict all these kind of freak accidents and sprained ankles and getting hit by a pitch and fracturing your hand with all these key position players in Westberg, Arias, Mounty, Mateo, all these 4 key infielders that the Orioles would like to have used right now. So that's another identity crisis. And then you're going through along and bringing all these guys, top prospects, in Jackson Holliday, Kobe Mayo, trading Connor Norby to get some more pitching reinforcements. And so that's another crisis because you're losing lots of depth in the farm, but thank goodness that the Orioles had that depth to even be able to use that for all these injuries that are happening right now. So there's lots of moving pieces, and you can't really just pinpoint the Orioles struggling to be like, okay, this is a bad team, because they're not. The talent is there. Right calls have been made, especially by Hyde and Elias, for whether you bring in a pinch hitter and small decisions like that, but also when it comes to the trade deadline, because the Orioles would be nowhere right now if they didn't have Eflin.
Right. I mean, Elias did acknowledge yesterday that he did not anticipate this level of injuries on the position player front. Like, they are still getting solid contributions from guys like Emmanuel Rivera and Livan Soto. Emmanuel Rivera has an 881 OPS with the Orioles this season. Livan Soto has an 899. Those are guys that you do not want to lean on, right? Eloy Jimenez and Austin Slater were not meant at the deadline to play as often as they have. Eloy Jimenez was a guy that the Orioles acquired because the upside is there, and you wanted to see what he could do as a platoon bat designated hitter against left-handed pitching. Eloy Jimenez has had to be in the lineup a lot more than that. Austin Slater, same thing. This was throughout his career, he hit lefties really well. And you bring him in because you think he can be a good platoon 4th outfielder against left-handed pitching, because you have Colton Cowser and Cedric Mullins in left field and center field who struggle against left-handed pitching. That was supposed to be Austin Slater's role. So let's move away from kind of what Elias talked about yesterday and diagnose things a little bit. Again, I know we have done this before, but obviously the biggest issue, first and foremost, is injuries. We've said it 1,000 times on this podcast already. Of course, you wouldn't anticipate this number of position player injuries, and I don't blame Mike Elias at the deadline for going after starting pitching as aggressively as he did, because that was the need for the Orioles. And Zach Eflin has been amazing. He has been as advertised. But like I mentioned, you are missing your starting first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, a really good depth piece in Ramon Arias. You traded Austin Hayes at the deadline because you thought you had the position player depth, which you did at the time. Heston Kjerstad gets hurt. Like, that was supposed to be your 4th outfielder. You trade Hayes, you figured you had Kjerstad there, and Slater as a platoon guy to be your 4th, 5th outfielder. But no, of course, Kjerstad gets hurt, and now you don't have as much depth in the outfield as you thought you had. And then obviously we know about the pitching injuries. Bradish, Means, Wells, Batista, Coulomb, Grayson, Webb. Like, the pitching injuries have been awful, but the pitching rotation has been solid as of late. They are not the reason that the Orioles are on this slump. But as we mentioned, and as Mike Elias mentioned, injuries lead to pressing. And right now it seems like everyone is hitting like they want to be the guy to turn things around single-handedly. And that's just not how things are going to work. And as I mentioned, it's hard to get away from that, because of course you want to be the guy to turn things around. It's just not that easy. And the other consequence from injuries as well, you're taking guys out of positions to succeed. Part of what made the Orioles so successful, especially in the first half of the season, was their depth, right? You had guys like Ryan O'Hearn that had an OPS, in the 850, 900 range. And if you really broke down his numbers, Ryan O'Hearn wasn't playing against left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
That's not where Ryan O'Hearn thrives, because at your first base designated hitter spot, against left-handed pitching, you would have Ryan Mountcastle playing first base, and you would have a right-handed hitter as your DH, whether it was Anthony Santander getting a day off from playing the outfield, or Adley Rutschman DHing with James McCann behind the dish. You weren't playing Ryan O'Hearn against left-handed pitching. And so you were able to leave Ryan O'Hearn in a spot where he could just play against righties, and he could be your 3 or 4 hitter in the lineup, and he could absolutely mash. Ryan O'Hearn is a quality first baseman, and yes, he is a solid replacement every day for Ryan Mountcastle. But Ryan O'Hearn was able to thrive because the Orioles were able to put him in a position to succeed. And you're seeing it really across the board. As I mentioned, Austin Slater, Eloy Jimenez were not supposed to be playing this much. If they were in their roles and doing what the Orioles hoped they would do, like Austin Slater, just playing against left-handed pitching as a platoon outfielder, great. That's a really good spot for him. If Jackson Holliday was just starting at second base against right-handed pitching, we don't see the struggles from him that we're seeing right now. If Kobe Mayo was just, platooning here and there, I don't know if he would completely turn things around, but I would bet that he would look better than the numbers would indicate right now. But you have to force guys to be in positions that weren't intended for them because there are so many injuries. And so, yeah, the lineup is not going to be as good, even though, you can look at somebody like O'Hearn and say, well, the numbers are down in the second half of the season. But dig into why. It's because he has to play in roles that he wasn't supposed to be playing in.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of the next man up mentality, and they've kind of exhausted that a little bit. I mean, well, a lot of it. But the next man up mentality worked for a very long time until they started running out of the really strong depth. And you got...
Until there was no next man. Yeah.
Exactly. And you were able to see high points and success from a lot of guys that you didn't expect it, like Slater and Soto and Eloy Jimenez, those kind of guys, and Emmanuel Rivera. But until it gets to a point where you're stretching these guys out so thin to what their capabilities are, because you're right, you're asking a lot of guys out of O'Hearn and Kobe Mayo, who's kind of still navigating every piece of the infield still as a young guy who's just been brought up for a second stint, and Jackson Holliday as well. So it is kind of stretching. You're stretching the guys out so thin, but because you have to. Like, it's not like there's not talent, but it's because you're kind of exhausting them so much that you have to figure out and maneuver ways to get around every single injury and move this guy into a place that he's not he's comfortable, obviously, because the work ethic of these guys is incredibly huge, and you needed that for a team like this to go through and be able to sustain this amount of injuries. Because they're willing to do that, but it's not necessarily are they willing to, but how much further can they?
Yeah, and struggles, I think, in general, just snowball. Like, it's human nature that you're struggling, you're pressing, you're trying to get something going. I mean, these guys are trying.
Yeah.
Like, you saw yesterday, the entire team changed their walk-up songs to something funny. Gunnar Henderson was talking about it last night. Like, they were just trying to get the clubhouse in a more fun, goofy mood, because sometimes you just need to stop pressing so hard and just laugh. Like, it wasn't that funny because the game last night didn't go that well, but like Ryan O'Hearn's walk-up was just the loudest bagpipes I've ever heard in my life. I'm sitting up here in the warehouse doing social, and I jump out of my chair because it's the 7th inning. Here comes Ryan O'Hearn just blaring bagpipes. Like, they're trying something. Colton Cowser is Milkshake is his walk-up song now, because he's like, they're trying to get it done. And I know it is easy to point fingers in a situation like this, but if you don't think that the front office and the coaching staff and the players are trying to turn things around, you're just flat out wrong. This team knows how to win. They did it in the first half of the season. They won 100-plus games last year. Brandon Hyde was not the manager of the year on accident. Like, this is a good manager. This is a good coaching staff. They are trying to turn things around, and it's just not working that well. They're trying to figure it out. If you think there's a lack of effort, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. It maybe not producing the results that you want it to, but they are trying to turn things around. Everybody in the organization, as Elias said yesterday, you feel it at every single level. So how do you fix it? There's not really a good answer. And if there was, then this coaching staff in this front office would have figured it out by now. The most obvious thing is getting healthy, having guys like Brian Mountcastle, Jordan Westberg, Danny Coulombe. Those are really good players. Those are all-star caliber players to get back in the lineup. And we should not everything that's happening with this team right now can be excused by injuries, but I don't think we're talking enough about how impactful these kinds of injuries are. So that's first and foremost. I think the biggest thing for me is just like, see one go in.
Yeah.
It's like they're on a cold stretch in basketball where it's like Klay Thompson's 0 for 11, even though he's one of the best shooters on the planet. You kind of just need to see one go in. They need a moment right now. There was a moment last month when Anthony Santander hit that grand slam, when Jackson Holiday had the bases clearing double and came in as a pinch hitter. Those are moments that you can point to and say, man, the mojo felt like it was there. The mojo doesn't feel like it's there right now. And so I want a moment. Give me a walk-off this week. Give me a home crowd that's just fired up in the ninth inning because the Orioles just did something really cool. Get the mojo back, be able to get a win, go back into the clubhouse and just go we know how to do this.
Yeah.
Because they do know how to do it. They just need to feel like it.
And the potential is 100% there. I mean, it's not like they're losing with 4-game stretches at a time. They're still getting some wins in there. They just, I think, need a series win. Just 2 out of 3. Just get one.
Take 2 out of 3.
And then, I mean, we also are talking about this identity crisis and all these struggles, but this is still a playoff team. They're
not missing playoffs.
They still have a 99.2% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs.
Yeah.
So they will be there, and it's just a matter of getting Westberg, getting Arias back, getting Mountie back, and just having that mentality. Like you said, have a great, amazing moment that brings the energy back, and then you're kind of get on a roll again, which is something that we know the Orioles can do. I mean, it's kind of hit a point where instead of looking at how the Orioles are doing right now, you're kind of rooting for other teams and rooting for their downfalls as well, which is obviously going to happen as it gets close to the playoffs.
Sure, that always happens, yeah.
And you're obviously rooting for the Yankees to lose right now, because even if by the time you approach next Tuesday, which is when the Orioles go to Yankee Stadium, as long as they're just no more than 3 games back, then they're still in it, honestly, for the division title. So it's not a lost cause right now. They just need to kind of get their mojo back, like you said, and even maintain, if they can't get that division title, maintain the top wild card spot. They're only 1.5 games ahead of the Royals for that right now.
Yeah.
But the Tigers, you can root for the Tigers, who are going up against the Royals just for this point in time, and say, okay, bring the Royals down a little bit. Tigers may creep up. They would if they beat the Royals right now, but still, as long as the O's can clinch that top wild card spot, you're in a pretty good position as you hit game 162 and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, teams have done this in the past. Teams have started out hot, had a similar winning percentage to this in the second half, and then they just get hot at the right time. Look at the Rangers. Look at the Diamondbacks.
Yeah.
Both of those teams did this last year. Stumbled into the playoffs, and then there they go, because you don't want a team to get hot at the wrong time. If they get hot at the end of September, early October, this is still one of the more talented teams in baseball. There's still nobody in the American League that you look at and think, wow, they're just completely running away with this thing. Go get one. It's unfortunate that you are playing a Giants team that has no momentum in the second half of the season, but of course in the 3-game series that you get them, they're tossing Blake Snell and Logan Webb.
Yeah.
But tonight, Hayden Birdsong, no offense, my guy, go get him. This is a game. Dean Kramer has allowed 1 earned run in his last 13 innings. He's got 14 strikeouts and 5 walks over his last 2 starts. Just go get this lineup.
Yeah.
Give me a big win at home, crowd into it, see one go in, get the ball rolling a little bit, because there hasn't been a moment over the last few weeks that you can point to and say, we can start momentum with this. There it is. We need that.
And I know we've said that pitching isn't the issue right now, which it's not. I mean, you have a few flukes here and there, but that's normal. But then you also kind of look at down the stretch for the way the rotation goes right now. I mean, at Yankee Stadium, it's Kramer, Eflin, Burns, which is something you feel really, really good about, the way that they've been playing right now. And that's also a key to go into Yankee Stadium. I mean, the Orioles also kind of play well on the road as well. So it's not like they're going into Yankee Stadium kind of asking for a loss. Like, that is anybody's ball game at that point, especially with that trio and pitching right there. That's something to feel good about as long as nothing changes for that lineup and the way that that's going. But I do think you're right. Tonight, especially with Kramer, it'll be huge to see. I've said huge like 8 times on this podcast, but it'll be grand to see.
It'll be just grand.
What happens tonight.
It'll be just lovely. It's not gone, I think, needs to be a takeaway here. Yes, the Orioles are struggling. Nobody is saying that they are not. Mike Elias came out yesterday and acknowledged this slump. Nobody is shying away from the fact that they have not been playing their best baseball. But if you're not looking at this team with hope still there, then you're missing the bigger picture. Because guys are going to come back. Yes, the Orioles have really struggled with runners in scoring position lately. Oh, maybe getting their all-star third baseman, who's the best clutch hitter on the team and hits incredibly well with runners in scoring position, will help. Yeah, maybe getting Jordan Westburg and Ryan Mountcastle and Ramon Arias back at the bottom of the lineup is going to help string some hits together. And all of a sudden, you're going to be looking at the lineup with, Westy hitting 5th or 6th and Mountcastle hitting 5th or 6th and Ramon hitting 7th or 8th. And all of a sudden, you're going to look at the lineup and go, oh, they can turn this thing around.
It's stacked.
Like, they can go 1 through 9. The lineup is going to feel different if these guys come back and they get healthy. The bullpen is going to feel different with Jacob Webb and arguably your best bullpen arm in Danny Coulombe. So, don't put everything on the injuries, but don't forget about the injuries. And don't forget that these guys are coming back. And at the end of the day, you can go into the playoffs and you need to trust that your good players are going to be good. This team won 100-plus games last year. It is largely a similar group, if not an upgraded group. I know you lost guys like Felix Bautista due to injuries. Like, that sort of stuff is going to happen, but Corbin Burns and Zach Eflin in the starting rotation going into the playoffs when you didn't have those two last year, you feel really good about that. If this lineup is healthy going into the playoffs, you feel good about the lineup. You need to have faith that once guys come back, once the mojo starts to roll a little bit, this lineup is going to feel a lot different. And I think the players are going to feel a lot different as well, because it would not surprise me at all if Ryan Mountcastle and Jordan Westburg get back. And then all of a sudden the lineup is like, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, the boys are back. Like,
no,
let's roll. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility at all, where it just feels like the old Orioles team again that was young and fun and exciting and athletic, and they were hitting home runs. This team is still there. They still have that capability.
Yeah, and it seems really annoying for me to say this right now, but seriously, a vibe shift is all that they need.
They need to get the mojo back.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I mean, we've talked about the injured list as well. This is the last thing I'll say, but 99, almost like 98% of the injured list this season have been difference makers into this lineup. And yes, you have people who have been out for the entire season, like John Means and Tyler Wells, and Kyle Bradish, unfortunately, but then you've got some people back. You're getting people back, and that's going to be huge for this vibe shift, because not many other teams can say that they've lost this many difference makers on their team and still stayed afloat. Yeah.
I mean, getting a comment on YouTube last year, what have you done for me lately? They still have the 3rd best record in the American League. This is still a playoff team. I know the struggles are there and they are in your face, but like, this team was so good during the first half of the season. They built up, not that you want this to happen, but they built up enough wins in the first half of the season where they can ride something like this out. This is still the team with the 3rd best record in the American League. No, they're not going to win 100 games, but they should probably still win 90. Like, they're right there. And if this team gets hot at the right time, there's not a team in the American League that I would point to right now and say that that team is unequivocally more talented than the Baltimore Orioles. And if they are in a 7-game series with both teams riding good momentum, then I take them in 7. There's just not another team like that. If the Orioles get hot, they are really, really dangerous. They just need to get hot. The mojo needs to get there. It is not out of the realm of possibility. Can't guarantee that it's going to happen, but it's right there in front of them. If guys come back healthy, if they are able to hit the ground running and be strong coming back from an injury, which is not a guarantee, but it's a possibility, they can put things together. The season is not over. Like, this is still going to be a playoff team, wild card or division, whatever it may be. They will still make the playoffs, barring something completely unbelievably drastic. We're not going to go there. It's a 99% chance they're in the playoffs. And if this team is hot and if this team is healthy, they are one of the best teams in baseball.
I have no notes.
I know it doesn't feel that way.
That was good, Brendan.
Hey, thanks.
That was a good pep talk.
Get me in there. Rally the troops.
Bring Brendan into the clubhouse.
Just get the boys back in town. The boys will bop, and that's all that needs to happen. The boys will bop.
Trademark
that. Well, that's our vibe check.
That is the vibe check. Vibe shift needed.
Vibe shift needed.
That is a given, and everyone knows that. Elias included.
Yeah.
But vibe shift is inbound.
I know that people aren't feeling good. I understand if you are looking at this team over the last few weeks and you are feeling negative about it. Mike Elias said literally yesterday, like 2-8T, he said, everybody is feeling this negativity.
Yeah.
Nobody is shying away from it. But this is too talented of a team to write off. And they're right there. Hopefully it starts tonight. Dean Kramer on the mound. He has been really, really good over his last 2 starts. They are facing a Giants team without much to play for. By the way, Blake Snell, best pitcher in baseball in the second half of the season, averaging over 13 strikeouts per 9 innings in the second half. Okay. It was Blake Snell facing a lineup that was slumping. He is unbelievable right now. He is literally the all-time leader in strikeouts per 9 in Major League Baseball history. Okay. You ran into a buzzsaw. Go get him tonight. Like, Hayden Birdsong, you're on the list, buddy. You are going to be the guy.
She's coming. My bobblehead
Annie's bobblehead is coming. The Orioles need to hit, and they need to do it soon. Dean Kramer's on the mound. He has been awesome lately. Give him a good start. Give him a good win. Let's get the vibes going.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along with us here on YouTube and Facebook. We love reading your comments and answering your questions and all of that fun stuff. If you missed us on Facebook and YouTube, you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. Hopefully we will be back next week with a better vibe check.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming.
They're going to play good baseball. Feel it in my bones. For Annie Klaff, I'm Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.